This is Annabelle Goberti and you are listening to Lawfully Creative, my podcast to talk with professionals in the creative industries to hear their stories, what inspires their creation, what decisions change their careers, what relationships influence their work. Today's episode is brought to you by Crefovi, our London and Paris-based law firm focused on advising the creative industries. Subscribe to our podcast, Lawfully Creative, or catch up with our original shows on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, Stitcher, YouTube, Anchor, and many more podcast aggregators and platforms. Please do leave a review and rating about our podcast to encourage others to discover our curated content. Thank you. On the 5th of June 2019, I had the pleasure of meeting with Bob McDade, who is the co-founder of the music talent agency Manners McDade. He founded this agency a long time ago with his life partner, Ms. Manners, and turned it into one of the music talent powerhouses of the UK. They also have presence in Los Angeles, as Bob will explain during the podcast. And Manners McDade has become one of the go-to purveyors of musical talent in the UK for video content producers, such as advertising agencies, brands, film directors, documentary directors, etc. So for whenever you need some audio content, customized audio content for your video content, your video footage, then you can reach out to Bob and his team in order to obtain some customized music scores and recordings. So yeah, it was fantastic to meet up with such a prestigious member of the UK music industry, and I had a delightful time with Bob on the 5th of June, as you will witness by listening to the following podcast.
Oh, do you want me to start?
Okay. Hello, podcast listeners. I have the pleasure of being in the presence of the imminent Bob McDade, co-founder of the film music and advertising music agency Manners McDade, but he co-founded with his wife, Miss Manners, Catherine Manners. It's a delight to be in his presence because he's a man who has a lot of knowledge on this field. I came across Bob working on a deal for a client who is a music composer in the advertising business a year and a half ago, and Bob was very resourceful in providing his insightful view on how a music composer can get or not an agent. So
Too kind. I'll take it.
Over to you, Bob.
Yes, as you say, we have been approaching our 20th year of operation now. We founded in 2001. We started off with one client.
Right.
And that was a composer who had, through his friendship with a director, long-term friendship, had been offered the opportunity to score a film for Disney.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a big leap in his career. And he'd been doing
a friendship with.
Composers often have at least one friendship with a director or a producer who takes them to each subsequent project.
Fantastic.
I wish I could remember his name, but Matthew Herberts, the composer, he has just scored Gloria Bell, which is on at the cinema at the moment, Julianne Moore, and that's a friendship with a Chilean director whose name has escaped me. His first film was A Fantastic Woman, and then he did...
Yes, I've watched it.
It's a lovely film, and then he did Disobedience, and now Gloria Bell.
Rachel
Vice and
Vice, yes.
Rachel McAdam,
Yeah,
yes.
that's right, yes.
A beautiful film, actually.
Oh, yes.
So
it's really on his first film.
So composers often have Yes, it was. Well, he'd done one film before, but it was a while ago, and things haven't worked out as he would have liked. And I think he was. He stepped back for a while.
Okay.
And went back to making albums and DJing and playing gigs, etc. And then that opportunity came up. But my point was, yes, just about every composer we represent will have at least one strong association with a director. And that director will take them on subsequent projects, whether TV or film.
It's fantastic. And so, for you, you just said that was your first client. You mentioned that composer. So for you, clients are actually the composers. Clients are not the end clients,
No.
i.e. the brands or the film directors or the film production companies.
Our clients are the composers who are signed with us for representation.
I see.
And that was how we started as a composer agency, because that project went well. And he would tell his friends, so a friend of his asked if we would represent him, and it just grew from there, really. And that was for about 8 years, and so we had quite a large roster.
Yeah.
And then we found our clients were asking us if we knew good publishers. And there aren't really any specialist publishers in media music.
Okay, so would you mind explaining to us in layman terms, what that means in the context of film music compositions? Publishing, I mean, would that be like managing the relationships with the likes of PRS, the Collecting Society for basically composers and lyricists, I suppose, and also making sure that the royalties come in and are being paid on a
But it's also, because we also then go to publish them, then our relationship goes all the way through the commission. So we would start off with negotiating the actual contracts for the job. Negotiating the terms and conditions.
But that would be the agent's job.
That would be where that as well. And then we would change our hats to be the publisher, and then you would negotiate the publishing terms on the film or TV.
And so what does this entail in pragmatic terms, negotiating the publishing of
Well,
film and TV?
it's from the very prosaic in that you're ensuring that everything is properly registered.
Okay,
And
with the collective society.
With the collection societies. And then, because we are an independent, we have a network of sub-publishers throughout the world.
Like music sales?
Usually companies, we usually look for independents like ourselves.
Okay.
In Paris, we work with Velvetica. I don't know if you've come across them in your work.
Okay.
So we have a sub-publisher in each territory. And so once the work is registered, you then inform your sub-publishers that this film is shown in their territory at this time.
I see.
And then they make sure the royalties are collected properly from their collection societies.
From their territories, yeah.
And then the longer term thing is, apart from collecting, you're also seeking to exploit that publishing if the contract allows it.
Yes.
That you now have a library of songs which you can sell onto other projects.
So we're talking here about a sync license
Indeed,
or
yes.
a master. I mean, this is perhaps, and can you also negotiate some master licenses, or do you also?
Well, we very rarely deal with master licenses because they're usually owned by the record companies.
Right. Okay.
Or if it was a film or a TV, then the production company would own the master more usually.
Of course, yeah.
So when we sync, it's obviously a good idea if we can also clear the master. Because if we get a brief and we put tracks forward, the nightmare is they choose your track and then you can't clear the master. So you have to go to the label, and then the label... It's
a mess.
It's often more of a problem with much smaller labels, because if you're doing a sync, it can be anything from £500 to £50,000. If you have a small struggling label suddenly thinks there's a big check here, they can they can ask for too much, and they can harm that relationship. And because it has to move quite quickly, then the buyer will often just move on. If there's any delay,
of course,
they will just go.
Especially in the advertising world, it needs to be really snappy. And
tell me about it.
I think it needs to be done yesterday.
Why is it advertised that agencies always ring with the brief on Friday afternoon and tell you they need it first thing on a Monday?
Oh my God, is that right?
Yeah,
Is that what they do?
It's,
Probably they do it on purpose. No?
I have no idea why they do that. I think the week passes them by and then they suddenly realise there's something they haven't done. I don't know, but they're not telling us.
Is that a nice wine?
But we still, it's very acceptable. Yes.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Thank you.
So
Going right back to the beginning, we started with a single composer. Then we built our composer roster over the next few years. Then some of our composers were asking if we could recommend a publisher. We looked around. We couldn't really find one which specialised in media music. So
really? At the time? Back in the 90s, right? It was the 90s, yeah?
Late 90s.
Late 90s.
And the reason we got the job with the composer who was writing for Disney is that his publisher was being obstructive and demanding that they kept the publishing. But that never happens on
Disney,
big films.
especially with Disney.
Yeah, on Disney. On Disney. We had a phone call with a Disney lawyer I remember well, and he said if we would forego one aspect of the rights, we could keep all the money that was collected from the cinema box office in the States. And that might have passed us by because we were relatively inexperienced, but I'd worked for Performing Rights Society, PRS, and I knew that they don't collect at the box office in America. So he was just trying to... And we confronted him with this, and he laughed, and he said, look, I work for Disney, I have to get the best deal I can. He just laid out the reality of it, whereas we were... As we do now, we try and build relationships and be honest and straightforward. And he was saying, don't make that mistake. When you're dealing with Disney or Universal or Warner's, they're just looking for the best deal and they don't really care how you do our business. It's not a mutual thing.
I read a book about the foundation of CAA, the creative agency, which of course is massive today. And one of the founders, Michael, I can't remember his surname, but he actually moved to Disney at some point later in his career, and he didn't really like it. So his wife, ex-wife, actually reported a joke. One of the famous directors who had dealings with Disney said, "So how is it like working for Mousewitz?"
Mousewitz. Yes, that's cruel but fair. Yes.
And I read that, I was like laughing in my bed. I couldn't help myself.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah,
anyway, so backtracking is slightly. So you said you worked for PRS for some time, but before this founding of Manners McDade 20 years ago, what was it you were up to, Bob?
You mean what jobs were we in at that time?
Well. Okay, yeah. What were you doing?
Well, I was still at the PRS. That was the end of mine, and I was pretty fed up of it. And if you follow the news, you can read that it's still a basket case of a company. It's still having major problems. They've just replaced the chief executive yet again.
Yeah, Robert Ashcroft, right?
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah, and now they have.
Couldn't believe that guy was paid 1.5 million per year. I was like, well, and someone told me, yeah, but he's got to pay for his divorce, right? I was like, yeah, well, it's a lot of money, though.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unbelievable. In the end,
why do you think it's like it's bad? I mean, look at the Spanish guy; it's terrible. They just got fined actually by the antitrust authority.
They have no competition. There's no competition to PRS.
It's the same in France.
They can be fucking awful, but they don't, pardon my language, but they don't lose any business. Because where else do you go?
Your language is fine. Well, I mean, yes, although there's been an opening of the market a few years ago when a new regulation from the EU allowed composers to actually register with whatever EU-based collecting society they wanted. So that created a tiny bit of competition. But from what my understanding is, PRS is supposed to be one of the best collecting societies, really.
It's frightening to think that. But yes, dealing with Gamer, for example, Game of the German Collection Society.
Oh, yeah, right.
They still exist in the 1970s. Everything's on paper.
Yeah, well, probably everything is in German as well. So if you're not a German speaker, you're a bit dead.
So they're kind of slow and very bureaucratic.
Really?
Sassen it seems to have reinvigorated itself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
With Jean-Michel Tron? With the new guy?
They seem to be much more on the ball.
Wow. Oh, yes. I went to the Mama 2 years ago, and they were showing the new software for members to be able to check their statement. It seemed to be really on top of everything IT
and, and now there's Impel with a digital rights collection, and that's that's swept the rug from underneath PRS, because people are saying, okay, we're going with Impel instead, like we do.
Okay.
So yes, hopefully the new chief executive will sort it out. Okay. She's from a purely business background.
What's her name, actually?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not even sure she's in position yet. I read the press release.
It's
she's completely from outside of music.
Yeah, but it's happening at the moment, right? I think Robert Ashcroft is just about to leave. Yeah. So it's exciting, but not quite yet. Right.
So it's interesting times. So hopefully, because she's from a purely business background.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they get too tied up in the idea of it being part of the music industry, which it is, strictly speaking.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's more about data and money.
Nowadays, yes.
They have no creative input, so why do they continue to pretend they do? I don't know. So I was working for them almost.
In which capacity? Where were you? In which team were you?
Oh, they asked me to do their marketing, because they've not done any marketing at all.
Okay.
And their entire approach was to send letters to people saying, you play music in your shop, you must buy a license. If you don't, you'll be prosecuted.
Yeah.
So it was all.
It's not very good marketing, but
it was all stick and no carrot, basically. There was no sense, and we tried to add value and say, okay, explain why it was advantageous to play music in your business. And I'll take credit. We commissioned academic research into the effect of music in various environments, like restaurants, bars, shops.
Excellent.
Which was very successful. Simple things like if you play classical music and then ask people what their impressions of it, they give a much more favourable impression than if you play drum and bass. Right. Really simple stuff, and you can find out how you can make people move around a shop quicker. Or
through music?
Yeah. So there are ways you can use it subliminally. Not so there's messages underneath that nobody can hear, but just in terms of how it changes people's perceptions of your prices and your atmosphere and your
And poppy music, I suppose, pop music to enhance sales.
It completely depends on the demographic of your customer base, etc. And so that was my attempt to change the culture, so it wasn't just knocking on doors.
And bring value to the businesses which are using music. Even my law firm, Crefovi, actually received a letter like this from SSM asking, please do pay your royalties because you are a French business. I'm like, I don't play any music in my law firm, offices. So anyway, that's
it's the idea. If you play music in an office, you must pay a bill. So they were purely knocking on doors and saying, it's the law, give me your money. And obviously that creates a lot of resentment. Yeah. So we just tried to change the whole thing. So,
and bring value to this.
And bring value to it and explain why it was a good idea and why this license was worth the money.
How long did you stay in this role for, Bob?
Well, I stayed in the role after we actually established the company because...
Really?
Well, for revenue, to pay the mortgage, simple as that.
Gosh, you must have worked quite your socks off then. 2 jobs?
It was very easy at PRS.
Okay.
There was little or no discipline whatsoever.
Okay.
I remember the 98 World Cup, I think I saw just about every game during the day. So So it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was easy work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, after a while, you realise you're not really.
Well, look, you've leveraged your position
You're getting no sort of satisfaction from what you do.
Right.
And the company was very resistant to this.
Yeah.
They were the people on the ground who knocked on the doors saw themselves as law enforcers, and they were very resistant to any change. I remember we did a conference and got them together and asked them simple questions like, "What's your favourite piece of music?"
Mm-hmm.
And some of them had no answer. And we organised.
So they were not passionate about music anyway.
They didn't care about music at all. Wow. And we would take them to see live music.
I can't believe people live like this. Just a job to pay bills.
We took them en masse to see some live music, and it was this beautiful evening. And several of them, well, it wasn't an admission from them, but they had never seen live music before. Wow. It's quite extraordinary. And these are the people they were sending out to knock on doors and say.
Well, look, you brought something important.
They're still using that research.
Also, were you already married with Catherine at the time, or were you already a partnership together, or?
Yes, we got together in '99, I think.
Okay.
99.
So was that before you set up the company?
That was before, yes.
Okay.
We were both unhappy in our jobs. And I was unhappy because I was kind of unfulfilled. Mm-hmm. For Catherine, she was working for a large music publishers, and she was working. My wife has a far more illustrious background in music than do I. My background is working in record shops before I went to PRS and DJing.
Oh, that's so cool.
So
you're coming really from the
it's not as cool as my wife, who had worked on projects with Stockhausen and Philip Glass. And managed Sir John Taverner. That's cool.
Managed who?
Sir John Taverner.
I don't know him.
Well, he's dead now. He was he was the first man to release anything on Apple Records, which is the Beatles label. Mm-hmm. And he scored New Year at the Millennium Dome. Mm-hmm. He scored the music that was played at midnights.
So a prestigious British.
He was very established.
St. John's Taverner.
Sir John Taverner, and he wrote a piece of music that was played at Diana's funeral.
Okay.
So he's very established and very well regarded.
Okay.
So that was her background, much more classical. Mine was much more less formal.
I'm starting to discover the music of Philip Glass, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Is he British or is he German? He's American.
New Yorker.
Right.
He was.
How come she started working with him?
Because of the business that she was working for were their publishers. I'm trying not to name them.
Right.
Because the reason she was unhappy is the company was run by an old man who'd run it forever, mm-hmm. and he didn't like promoting women past a certain point because...
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
It was very obvious. And it became very obvious to my wife when a position opened and they employed somebody, and she just thought, he's nowhere near as good at his job as am I, so that was where she gave up, really, and realised she couldn't go any further within that organisation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it happens to, I suppose, quite a lot of people. I mean, I know this couple who are making custom jewelry out of New York. Benamun is their brand, and the Manovits, they always say, if you really want to start making real money, you need to have your own business.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those who have an entrepreneurial streak, I guess, because you need to find the clients, but if you do, then I agree that's the best way to make real money.
Her experiences are reflected in the company today, because just about all our staff are women.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying we discriminate against men.
What do you mean in terms of your roster of composers?
We represent more women than any other agency.
Okay.
But in terms of the staff, they're nearly all women.
I think that's funny, because it was actually a question that I had set out on my email to you prior to this. Since we're on this point, actually, are there quite a lot of female composers? Because it's quite a lonely job, initially, I suppose, when you were writing the score and perhaps the lyrics as well, if there are any.
Studios are still very much male-dominated.
Oh, is that right?
It's the engineers.
Which, like in the recordings,
Yeah.
recording.
It's still a very male environment.
So, therefore...
And there's still even amongst those people who are commissioning the work, there's still underlying their outward displays of equality, they prefer sitting down with a man, you know.
Really?
It's still there.
But, and in terms of ladies who join, when you want to become a music composer, surely you must go to the Royal Academy of Music or this sort of schools or
well,
colleges?
in London it's the NFTS, the National Film and Television School.
Even for music, for film composers? NFTS is...
An awful lot of our composers come from the NFTS.
How interesting.
And we attend every year. They have the final films made by the students who are passing out, and we go and see those to see if there's any obvious talent on display.
Oh, really? You're doing like a wild casting?
Well, we love taking young composers.
Yeah,
and
sure.
The traditional path is you find an assisting job with an established composer. That's how you start your career.
Okay.
And that way you're on the inside, so you're getting to know everybody, and that's the traditional route.
And do you see quite a lot of ladies coming out of the NFTS? What do you call that degree? Is it the film music composition degree?
Yeah, it's a composition. Yeah.
Composition.
Media composition. I forget what they call it particularly.
Is it like split?
Even in the time we've been doing that, there's far more women than there used to be. It used to be almost a male preserve.
Because you see, for example, for the legal profession, it used to be definitely skewed towards men joining university to study law. I'm talking about the French data here.
Yeah.
But now it's like 70% of the young graduates who actually join university in the law department are actually females. So
I think we're almost in a time when things are changing positively, in that it's not just lip service, that you can see women coming through.
Yeah, okay.
And even the most sexist of men understand that it's no longer in their interest to
Do you know what I
discourage or undermine.
What I always say is, because I see it in my law firm, it's the market will talk. The market will give you some feedback. If they love what you do, whether you are a man or a woman, is irrelevant. If they just if they just like what you do, then you're in. So that's the way. I see
But there's interesting ways that industries will look to change things through the constitution. So they will say we must give. We've noticed something like Saatchi, I believe Saatchi do this.
Okay.
They have a percentage of their commissions have to go to female-owned companies.
Seriously?
Yeah. So that's a good way
They set up some quotas, like positive discrimination.
Yeah. And that creates positive change.
Well, that's okay. Well, that's quite full on, I think. But well, okay, if it works, it works.
Well, hopefully we get to a point where you don't need to do that.
Yeah. Oh well.
But so we're still not quite there, are we?
So when I was studying the market for my client, this film composer I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I noticed he mentioned your agency, Manners McDade, obviously, and then I looked at the market, to understand how this field, this very niche field of agencies representing music composers for film and advertising and gaming, music and projects is set up, and I saw that Manners McDade is really at the very top of the crop here. So, did you have a business plan with Catherine to turn it into this somehow powerhouse that it is today, or?
It feels, from my perspective, it's been a very gradual build of the company.
Yeah. What is it?
I'm not sure we've ever sat down and had a solid plan. We just leave ourselves in a position where we can take opportunities. I think that's a big thing, that you are nimble enough, you are deft enough
Yeah.
that if an opportunity comes, you can take it because you're not too structured, you're not too rigid.
What sort of opportunities are you referring to here? Do you have an example?
That's a good question.
Like, you mean a commission coming in, or?
I suppose sometimes we've been asked if we can involve ourselves on a project that we have no real experience of,
Okay.
and we don't really think about it. We just say yes, we can do that,
Gosh.
and then we go away and try and find out how do we do this.
That's daring.
But it keeps it interesting, and it keeps you.
Like what, for example? Say we have a show.
Well,
Live show, and
okay.
we need you to do work on the music background of it. Is that, for example, a sort of brief you would get?
Going into book publishing, we've done some book publishing. We know nothing about book publishing. We're not from that background. But a client asked. He said that was a stipulation that of his contract he would sign with us if we could facilitate making this book for him.
What, a book about what?
It was sheet music with pictures and art in there, and so we just said yes, of course we can. And then afterwards, what the hell are we going to do? How do we do this? Who do we know? Yeah, and you just start. So
how do you get paid on such projects? I mean, do you take a commission, like a percentage of what is
It's usually
the
not.
royalties are nothing on a book, anyway. So.
No, indeed.
Yes,
we do quite a lot of work which has there's no straight thread of revenue.
Okay.
You do this because it
to build the rapport.
Absolutely. The French way.
The composer.
Yeah, you solidify that relationship. They trust you more. They see you as being able to do these things. If they've been to other companies and said we would also, as part of the contract, we also want to do this book, and the other company said that's not our business, you have to go somewhere else. Right. Well, for them, that was the deal breaker. They're just looking for the person who says, yeah, of course we can do that. Because that should be what you're looking for.
In your, so you mentioned, thank you so much, it's really interesting not interesting, but it's really fascinating to understand how you make your choices, your business choices. But so...
Neither of us have an MBA. We haven't been to business.
You've got your intuition.
And for me personally, a personal thing, I didn't. I was thinking, will my mum ever hear this? I never really had a father figure who I liked. I didn't really like my father, but the guidance he gave me was, I would think, what would my father do in this situation? Yeah. And then I'd do the opposite of that. And think, well, that must be the right thing to do. And it served me quite well. And we kind of, because my wife and I were both unhappy in our jobs, we think, well, what would they have done? I'll do the opposite of that, and that will probably be the right thing to do.
So you are contrarians.
So contrarians. Well, I'm a contrarian. My wife not so much, but I'm very much contrarian. And it just means the way we treat our staff, the way we run our business is a bit more joyous and a bit more happy and a bit more about thinking, I want to be able to sleep at night. I don't want to cheat anybody. I want to be honest with everybody. Yeah. Having experienced those things where you put in positions where you're lying to a client when you work for a business because they say, no, don't tell them that, tell them this. Mm-hmm. And you don't have any autonomy. That's so frustrating. So when you've got autonomy, you think, well, you should look to create the best of all possible worlds. It's not about the bottom. We very rarely look at the bottom line. Yeah. We do the business and hope at the end of the year.
Exactly. Well, you are lucky that it's working very well this way.
I don't live in a big house.
Neither do I.
That's okay, but I sleep well. And the people who work for us are all, we maintain relationships even when they leave. Well, we're very happy. Yeah.
Well, and your agency is truly prestigious in the market. You're the young executive managing director, but you've instructed, mandated your wife and you. I think she probably has as a business plan or an agenda, as you were saying.
Oh, she
wants
does,
to
yeah.
open.
She does. But she really, in her previous life, before she worked with us, she remembered, I hope she won't mind me, she remembered every morning in the shower crying and thinking, come on, you can do this, you can do this.
Or because she didn't like her job?
Because she hated her job, because her boss was a monster.
Okay.
Sorry, again, anybody listening to this. But it's just thinking, I do not want anybody to feel that way working for me.
Yeah.
They should be happy and supported and, yeah.
Well, yeah. And she's very young as well, so it's great you give her such a
she is, but she has the energy which perhaps as people in our mid-50s we kind of lack, that energy and drive. She has so much energy and drive, and she's already very well thought of within the industry.
Right.
And
what is her name again?
Harriet Moss. She's and our client, the age of our clientele is coming down.
Actually, you were just saying down that the average age of your roster of clients is coming down. You were saying that you also scout, so to speak, at the NFTS annual do or like opening show, and so are these? I mean, how do you select those composers? Is it word of mouth or?
It's completely based on our own perception of their work. So, do we like it? Is it interesting?
But how do you get in contact with these people?
Oh, they're
peculiar peoples.
Well, we're lucky in that usually, unless they're already established and have relationships, usually they're desperate for us to get in touch with them.
I know.
And in fact, most of the time we don't have to because they get in touch with us.
I see. So they come to you?
Yeah. We get lots and lots of submissions.
Okay.
And we listen to everything that's sent in, which is some things you don't need to listen to for more than a couple of minutes, and you know it's not suitable, or it's not of a certain standard, or it's not for us as an agency. So it's quite straightforward, actually, finding clients.
Actually, okay, great.
And sometimes we hear somebody will come to the office and say, I saw a film last night, blew my mind, the music was unbelievable, and we just see if that person's represented, who they're represented by. If they're already with an agency, then we don't contact them.
Okay.
Because we just feel, if they were unhappy, we'd know about it. And I don't want to poach people's, it doesn't seem like a good idea. I wouldn't like it to happen.
It's small ones. So
it's a small one.
And are they all able to actually read and write music? And the reason why I'm asking this is because the composer I represented a couple of years back, he didn't know how to write, and it was unbelievable. So he was doing everything by ear, but he couldn't write and read music. I was really in awe at what he was able to achieve.
It's not a deal breaker, but especially for media composition, if you're writing for film, it really helps because you may have an orchestrator or an arranger, or you have to give the sheet music to the musicians in the studio.
Right.
You kind of have to, but not always. There are people who are savant is perhaps the wrong word, but they've found a way to do it without having that skill. But they usually need somebody to transcribe the music for them.
Yeah, which is quite a job in itself. Yeah.
And within that environment, which is quite competitive, then that would probably be seen. That would be seen as a disadvantage, whether it was or not. Yeah.
And these kids coming out of the NFTS, did they go to a music college or
usually, yeah. Usually they would have already had their music degree. In this country, Leeds is a big place they go. Leeds University, they do a
Leeds University,
they do a big music course.
Okay.
But then often those courses are they're not specific to media composition. It's okay, you can write music, but writing to picture is a skill in itself.
Yeah.
So you can't just take a composer and say, write for my film. They might not be able to do that.
No, it's as you said, it's
a
a skill in
verb.
itself. Yeah, so therefore, hence the second
So that's what
layer of finishing training
Absolutely,
at the NFTS, yes, of
it's
course.
a finishing school, yes.
Yeah, but not the one for young ladies in Switzerland. A bit more in depth on that. Do they usually play music instruments? Those kids?
Yeah, nearly. Almost 100% of the time.
Okay. Is there a particular instrument that they play? Piano or strings? In general?
I'm thinking through our clients, and most of them play several instruments.
Several. Gosh.
I think if you took me now and started teaching me how to play something,
Yeah.
I would never have, no matter what, I would never reach beyond a certain rudimentary level, regardless of the quality of the teaching. Music is, you have a facility for music.
Yeah,
Just as people have a facility for acting or any of the arts, there's something innate which allows you to flourish, that puts you on that path. That's what I think.
I mean, I have two brothers, and the three of us, we are all musically trained.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, in the flute as well as piano, and we all went to music schools as well to learn music composition and music, reading, etc., etc. And I don't know, when you are like 5 or 6 years old, it's okay. You do this 1 hour every night to play your instrument if you have a time. But it's also a lot of you learn the discipline as well. So, and it's nice extracurricular activity. But you're right. I think it definitely needs to be done. To be started when you are young.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
That discipline, was that discipline enforced, or was it innate in you that you thought, here's my hour for playing the flute? Or was it a parent saying, come and practice the flute?
Not in my case. Probably more for my brother, Benjamin, where my mum had to say, look, you've got to play the clarinet here.
It's just been decided.
Because your teacher has told you that you need to play 1 hour every night.
Okay.
But as far as I was concerned, no, I didn't have to be pushed. But when you were going to your weekly teachings, the teacher would tell you need to rehearse every evening 1 hour. So I gave you quite a high goal to achieve. But yeah. So these kids are really multi-talented. They play several instruments. They can, score, write music. Do they also write lyrics, or is that another skill in itself to write?
Oh, that's a skill in itself.
It's a skill in itself.
And also, I'd say you can be. The reason perhaps they go to the NFTS is that, in my experience, you can have people who can write music, but they can't write music to picture. But equally, you can have people who can write music to picture. But if you say, if somebody applies to us to desiring representation, we'll ask for their music.
Sure.
What do you write when there's no picture? And quite often they have nothing.
They have nothing.
Because they are trained to write to a picture. Without that stimulus, they
can't have a
don't know where to go.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of our clients who are multi-talented, who can write music for themselves or for picture or for whatever, but there are those who are very focused on media music. I think that was our experience. Your composer, he had written music, but it didn't have a voice. It was kind of an imaginary film.
Yes.
Here's some danger, here's some romance. And that's very different from what's inside. I'm talking to somebody at the moment, I'm commissioning him to write an album. Mm-hmm. And he's
an album for?
My label. I have a record label. It's tiny.
Okay.
Tiny and insignificant. But he is about to become a father for the first time. Mm-hmm. He's reading philosophy. He's interested in climate change. So there are all these threads going into his music that are coming out that he's trying to express. But some people can't do that.
What are you going to do with the album?
We will release it.
Oh, to release it, right? Okay. But that's like a piece which is nothing to do
Nothing
with
to do
pictures,
with it's
video
purely
content.
music.
Okay.
It stands alone. Hopefully we can see.
Is that just a pet project or?
That was my 50th.
But they call me so
That was my 50th birthday present, and my wife said, "What would you like?"
Ah, very kind.
And I said, "I'd like a record label,"
Really?
which she thought was cheaper than buying me a Porsche. Not that I can afford one, but
Is that a joke?
well, you know, some men get to their 50s and they require something to make them feel young. And I guess that was the same thing with me. I fancied a record label as a project from scratch, figuring out how this worked. You learn by doing.
Sure.
What I've
You need to
learned
put it on
is...
Spotify and all the
well,
streaming
it is, yeah.
sites.
And we've done very well. It took 3 years to break even because I spent so much bloody money.
Yeah, well.
But it was
Every new
a
startup
labour of love.
project.
I enjoyed the whole
So
process.
you broke even after 3 years and all the
through
streaming
syncs,
sites.
etc.
Ah?
Through syncing the music, yeah.
Through syncing as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so
We
sync
eventually
licenses
broke it.
plus the royalties coming from the streaming.
Although it was a very expensive album. We recorded it at great studios. We hired the best musicians we could find, and
Right. Oh, so it wasn't stuff that he was doing on his computer, because
No.
that's what my client used to do. He used to do most of the stuff on his
no, he
computer.
did it properly. He did the draft on his computer,
I see.
and then we went into the studio. We hired.
You recorded it properly. Where did you record? I really very close to the studio where the Beatles were recording. You know, in
Abbey Road?
Yeah, in Abbey Road. Yeah.
We went to the other one, which is Air Studios, which is George Martin's.
Okay. All right.
He
Yeah.
was the producer. He built Air Studios for himself.
I see. Where is this?
It's
like
Hampstead.
Hampstead.
Yes.
That's not too far. Yeah.
It's
From
a church, but it's beautiful.
From your road. Right.
Wood panelled building. It's just fantastic.
I
And
love
I
it.
just love being there.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hampstead is fantastic.
And where we worked with Peter Gregson, who's amazing, and Thomas Gould, who's now head of the Britten Sinfonia. And yeah, we just had all these brilliant people
What do you mean, like to recruit the
to record the album. Yeah. So it was just a fantastic experience, which I enjoyed.
Do you know, I used to be a member of a woodwind ensemble before I founded my firm in 2012 here in London, and when I was still working in very large law firms, and so we would rehearse every Tuesday night, if I remember well. And the one project I really, really enjoyed is when actually we did some recording sessions for a composer who had written some music for a particular project, and then we recorded that, etc. So we had to be very careful not to make any noises. Love that. It was really, it was really a joyful experience. The rest of the rehearsing was a bit painful, but you know, when we would see this pinnacle of like this achievement, and then you could hear yourself afterwards when it had been edited, etc. I found it fantastic. Most of the time we were actually recording in churches for some reason, in the weekends, on my weekends. It was okay, I loved it.
Well, as somebody, you see, with zero talent, I have an...
Why do you say that?
Because I have no musical talent whatsoever.
Maybe you didn't have a chance to learn.
But here's a thing which meant I could make a big contribution.
Yeah.
And have an executive producer credit, and that was worth everything.
Oh, I thought. But why do you say you don't have any talent while you are able to actually pinpoint exactly what are the strengths and the weaknesses of a composer whenever you listen to their music? I was really struck, you know, when you gave me all this extreme insightful feedback about this client. Seriously, this music composer. I was, oh gosh, he's so on the money, you know, in his assessment of.
That's just experience, though. That's experience.
Although that's a skill in itself. This is talent.
Yeah, I would never have said that to a composer. Yeah, it was only, I remember our exchange, and I said, look, when a composer says, "What do you think of my music?"
Right.
I'm never honest.
Is it because we've got too much of an ego?
Is it? Well, yeah, you don't want to. These are people who have worked by themselves in a room by themselves and created this thing, and then it goes out in the world.
Yeah.
And to have some completely musically untalented guy like me say, I don't like that music, it's too cruel in a way. Because I admire it because they have this facility which I do not possess, so it's not for me to criticise them to their face. I think they've done something that I could not do anyway.
Right. But don't you see it more as a constructive feedback so that they improve their
They're very
output?
sensitive.
No, that I know. Well, I do think that
There you go.
I do think that the feedback that which I then passed on to this client of mine with music, because I think it was useful for him. Because,
Okay, good.
you know, the fact that you said that he needed to develop his own style, and that because of all these different jobs that he had in the advertising industry, then he was a bit of a chameleon, being able to change his style for every job. So he also needed to develop his style.
You
I
need
think
to
it was
develop your own voice, your own
exactly
style,
as you were saying. And on this note, actually, I remember when you mentioned that 2 years ago, you cited Johan Johansson as having developed his own voice. Whatever happened with this guy? Did he? It was an overdose, right? In Berlin, he overdosed.
There's a culture with it. I'm not sure if it particularly applies to him, and I can't claim to. I know people who know him or knew him.
Yeah.
I can't claim to know for certain.
It was sad.
But there's a certain culture in music, which is why it's been male dominated to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
In the studio, it's like men boasting that I've been in the studio for 48 hours. I've been in the studio for 72 hours.
That's right. Yeah, okay. So
As if there's nothing else. This is all there is. It's that male fixation on one thing, which is not a feminine trait, if you'll forgive me for saying this is feminine, that is masculine, but women are not anal like men, in that they don't, So there was a great...
Except Margaret Thatcher. Except Margaret Thatcher.
I'm thinking...
There was this French musician called Renaud who actually made a song about Margaret Thatcher, and it was like, she's more viril than any man around, but it was just a joke. So
it's quite true.
Do you think this is what happened? He basically exhausted himself and probably resorted to coke and bang, talk to himself.
I think he was taking amphetamines in order to stay awake for longer, so he could keep working. But he's quite a big guy, so his heart eventually.
Is that what happened?
Well, I don't know. I'd like to vocalise my disclaimer. I don't know. That's my best guess.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Thing is, I suppose that recording costs and studio costs are pretty high. So it's probably why they sort of do it.
It's more an obsessional thing.
Really?
Yeah, it's more a mad obsession.
Okay. It's like it's a funny story actually. When the income tax rate went up 70%, as I'm sure you know, the Rolling Stones immigrated to France, right?
Yeah.
And they went to this French villa, which is on the peninsula of Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat, which is a very, very smart and posh neighborhood south of France. Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat, and they were in this villa, but they were playing and jamming up until 5 or 6 in the morning. So they got kicked out of the residents. The local residents just couldn't stand they just couldn't stand it. They were on drugs all the time, and they were jamming. They were starting working at 1 or 2 a.m. And they would just work the whole night, record the whole night. And so after 1 or 2 months, both the residents just kicked them out. That was the end of the exit in France, the exile in France.
It's a miracle that they have managed to survive.
Oh, I saw
Ronnie Wood.
Ronnie Wood in the street, actually on the South Bank with his young wife.
With his young wife,
and his
young
2
baby,
years old twin daughters, and they were going to the Tate 2
They must
weeks
have
ago.
all had mass organ transplants or something. How are they still walking the streets?
They were cute. Anyway, so how is that? So I understand the supply chain on the creative side in terms of you finding all these composers nurturing their skills, making them find their own voices. But then, how does it work in terms of finding some assignments for? So, do you work mostly for independent film studios or film production houses, or also for majors, like the Disney and Universal and Warner of this world, or Sony's of this world?
Perhaps I think a circumstance that has changed massively over just the last few years.
Right.
Is that previously, unless you had an LA agent, you had no chance of working in LA. So the director might want you, the producer might want you, but if you're represented by an agent in Paris or Berlin or London, they're not interested. You have to have an LA agent. So that was always a bar.
Is there a reason why they're like this?
Well, it's an industry town. It looks after itself, doesn't it?
One thing that I noticed when I was in LA 2 or 3 years ago is that it's very... it's a microcosm, and it's a space. I mean, no wonder it's called Los Angeles. The Angels. That's that town, but it's very spacey, and people are very inward looking. And they're a bit scared of the rest of the world, and also because of the difference of the time zones with Europe, they seem to be really like in their own world and floating. On the. I love it. Because I'm myself quite, a bit spacey sometimes, and up there in the clouds, and so I love it. But I did notice that they were not the most interested in the rest of the world kind of people. So
everything is in LA. Everything they need. That entire infrastructure is local, and so they keep it that way. But that has changed because the major studios are not yet being usurped, but so much work is coming up with Netflix and Amazon and Google is starting and Apple are going to start.
But these guys are headquartered in Burbank and Culver City and everything. So are they more open-minded?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In terms of if you look at what Netflix and Amazon and all the rest are producing, it's much more international.
Well, they go on all the film markets. I mean, it's not complicated whenever you go to Berlinale, the Berlin Film Market, or in Cannes. In the first week, the Netflix and Amazon Prime of this world just do their markets, and they take all the best content. And so after the indies, they're like, "Oh my God, I don't have the money to pay for this and this and this," and then they just select the best. Netflix and Amazon Prime.
Because they don't.
It's true that they
don't spend too much time thinking about it.
No, they've got such deep pockets. I mean, all this cash they're making, every month. For all these subscriptions, they need to reinvest in something. And
the LA-based studios are quite conservative in their approach because they want to control everything. That's very different. Here it is. Very different. So that has changed, and so we're finding it is good for us without having an LA office. We find ourselves working on projects that we would normally, if it was LA based, we wouldn't get anywhere near. The whole thing has changed, which is lovely.
So for sure. So how does that work? So does this mean that you are in touch with Amazon Prime and the Netflix guys who are here in London? Or do you have to do back and forth Los Angeles, London, Los Angeles to be able to talk to the decision makers over there? Or you meet them at the film markets?
I think they're just the streaming platforms. They're not so LA focused, so you don't need to go there to meet Netflix.
I see.
Because they're in the Berlinale or the Paris Film Festival or London. Or
so that's where you meet
It's
them.
much more international.
In the London offices or at the markets, in the film markets. Were you in Cannes 2 weeks ago?
I did.
You did?
Well, I didn't go.
Someone else.
Three of our staff are going next week to Cannes Lion.
Oh, yeah, sure, fair enough.
That's a big deal for us,
Of course. And so the other question I wanted to ask is, why not get an LA agent? If that was an issue, why not make a sort of alliance with an LA agent? Or maybe you did?
We sort of did, yeah.
Okay.
We sort of did. In that we found something and we thought, because LA is it's
tough, huh?
It's so tough, and everybody's just trying to they will trample over the bodies of their enemies to get to what they want.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really go along with our ethos of...
Yeah.
My wife in a negotiation always says, look, there has to be a solution to this where we all walk away with something we want. Maybe not everything we want, but we can all walk away with something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas there it's much more dog-eat-dog and I want everything.
Super...
it's aggressive and
type A male approach, yeah.
Wow. A male approach, yeah. And again, that's another reason why it's changing, because it is becoming...
Thank you for listening to our podcast Lawfully Creative, produced by Crefovi Studios. Subscribe to our podcast or catch up and many more podcast aggregators and platforms. Please leave a review and rating about our podcast to encourage others to discover our curated content. Thank you.